You're not dealing with a bad kid. You're not dealing with a dumb person. You're dealing with a person who's struggling substantially in one way or another, or in multiple ways all at the same time. And they're just trying to make sense of the world around them in ways that make sense to them first.
Hi there. You're listening to Hypercast, an ADHD podcast. I'm Melissa, an ADHD coach and advocate.
Hi, I'm Brianna, an ADHD coach and soon-to-be therapist. We are here to explore all things ADHD, from unexpected challenges to unique strengths.
Join us as we share insights and strategies that empower you to live your best ADHD life.
Ready? Let's dive into today's episode. Welcome to Hypercast.
Welcome to Hypercast. Today's topic is ADHD and education.
And we have a lovely guest, Dustin Horvath, with us today to talk about his experience with ADHD and education.
Dustin is the founder of PCH Consulting, where he works with ADHDers and neurodivergent students to create personalized success plans. He is also the host of ADHD in a Hurry, a podcast packed with quick and helpful tips for ADHDers.
Hi, I'm very excited to talk about ADHD and education. So why is this topic important? Why do we want to talk about it at all today?
To me, or in general?
To you, in general, however you choose to answer that question, I'm very excited to hear your answer.
I am personally invested in the conversation because I have ADHD. I'm personally invested in the question because I have kids and they could have ADHD, but also on a human level, the more that we look at and understand and affirm what ADHD is and how it presents itself differently for different people, and you can look at race, gender, socioeconomic status, you can unpack it and break it down into different contexts. But recognizing that you're interacting with or teaching or inspiring a person, like that's the biggest component here, is you're not dealing with a bad kid. You're not dealing with a dumb person. You're dealing with a person who's struggling substantially in one way or another, or in multiple ways all at the same time. And they're just trying to make sense of the world around them in ways that make sense to them first. There's just so much intended or unintended harm in education, as far as I'm concerned, in America specifically, because of the numbers, because of the data, that if you don't measure up to what we expect of you, we are going to derive labels and put you in boxes or hold you back in essence. And that really doesn't sit well with me. And now, especially being a parent, I'm already preemptively worrying about what my girls are going to go through when they get older. I don't want that for them.
There's this personal aspect of, you are a teacher, you were a student. The experiences that you had as a result of having ADHD and being a student, you don't want for your daughter. There's that injustice warrior piece that comes with ADHD of, I want it to be fair. I want the opportunities that I had in my education to be available, and I want it to be better. And I want everyone to have an equal footing to launch into adulthood, versus, as you were saying, labels that were holding some kid back and unfairly.
Yes, absolutely. That's part of that inbuilt critic and that masking component of, I'm not saying all the right things. I'm not hitting all the right buttons in the right cohesive order. It's exhausting. I'm already tired just worrying about how I'm presenting myself.
That internal monitor.
Yes.
Dustin, you are an expert in post-secondary education. What do you think makes the transition from high school to college particularly difficult for people with ADHD?
I think part of it is, realistically speaking, I would say for a lot of ADHDers, let's say in high school, or they've just finished high school, like that 18, 19-year-old time period in life, it's so chaotic in and of itself, trying to figure out who am I and what makes me who I am and where do I want to go with things. And then you throw in the viewpoints and opinions and the assertions of others. And when this kind of runs contrary to what is almost intrinsic to you, or what validates or is affirming to you, then you're stuck playing the game of, am I in this to make myself happy, or am I in this to make someone else happy? Like, for example, I worked with a college student who started as a business major. On paper, math was not his friend. And business is all about numbers and stats, and it can be very math intensive. And every semester that I worked with him, you could see him every semester. It was the same ebb and flow of, it's not going well, it's getting worse, I need help, I'm going to quit, rinse and repeat. And one day he comes into the session with me and I'm like, listen, man, let's just cut the nonsense. What are you doing here? Why this? Why are you doing this to yourself? I didn't really have a plan, and my parents were on me about going to college, and my dad's in business, so I just figured two birds with one stone. I'll probably get a job with him. I'm like, but would you be happy doing it? Like, you seem to hate everything you do related to this major. Plus, you struggle substantially across the board. He's, I like writing and I like literature and I like writing. I struggle with it, but I like it. It makes me happy. And I'm like, so what can we do with that? And we actually took the time to reconstruct his major and took an audit of all of his courses, his credits he completed, what he was doing at the time. And he went home for a weekend and he basically gave a proposal to his parents. Listen, I want to change my major to English and I'm going to minor in business so I don't lose the credits that I've amassed. And what was really great about it was his parents broke down with him and said, listen, we didn't expect you to do this, but we also pushed you because we didn't think you were pushing yourself in any direction. And after we had that conversation, he ultimately did change his major. He did start the courses. And realistically speaking, he struggled still substantially, but for different reasons. But I could tell every semester that we worked together, he was a little bit happier. He felt a little bit more connected to what he was doing. And I think his intended goal at the time was to eventually become like a blogger, but he was going to use like his business background on the business side of things. And it was the best of both worlds.
So this goes back to what you were saying of working with the person. What they should do and what they want to do and what they need to do in order to succeed might be different from what they're trying to do or what society is telling them to do.
Exactly.
So you looked past the labels, you looked past whatever was going on and, oh, this kid's struggling. You found something that would allow him to experience joy and help him succeed.
Yeah. And I've had students that I had this one student in particular every semester. How's it going? Not happy. And I was like, dude, again, what do you actually want? He goes, I want to work with my hands. I want to do HVAC. I'm like, can you please drop out and go do HVAC? What are you doing here? Now, this runs contrary to like the institution, but I was like, as a human being, you only have a finite amount of time on this planet. What do you actually want to do? I was happy for him. He withdrew from the college. He finished his semester. He withdrew from the college. He went off to do HVAC training. He came back 2 years later, totally different person, and was happy. And as we're talking, he's like lighting up about his experiences and he just felt so accomplished in what he was doing. It's hard. HVAC is incredibly difficult work.
Yeah. It's actually very lucrative too. I think that's something
Yes.
that's left out of the conversation is that a lot of these
Yes.
quote unquote like blue collar jobs, you can make more once you finish your 2 years of education, 1 year of education than you do getting
Right.
out before your college.
Yeah. He was a completely different person in a lot of ways. When you have those human conversations and interactions, you see it. You get more important information from that person. It's just, I don't want to tell you to leave because we got to keep the enrollment going. I don't want to do that either. But that's why I do what I do now because I want to get to them before they start something.
Yeah.
It's not pro or anti-college. It's post-secondary. It's whatever you want it to be.
We're starting to talk a little bit about the emotions. So in your experience, what are the most common academic or emotional challenges that neurodivergent students face when making this transition?
I know for me, starting college was, I got in the dorm. My parents helped me get my stuff in. The door, it's like in a movie, the door swings closed behind you and the camera zooms in and you're like, now what? And it was a lot of that for me. It was a lot of, did I make the right choice? Am I in the right place? Am I going to make it through this? Do I even trust myself to make the right choices? And I know for me, that was predicated on many years of my parents or my mom, like making decisions for me. And that's actually another thing of like self-advocacy that I'm really big on is giving your child the space and the comfort. We're trying to foster an environment of comfort where they can actually say what they want or what they need so that they become comfortable in A, speaking up for themselves, and B, actually acknowledging to themselves and to someone else what they actually want from something. Like that student that I told you about with the business major, had he believed in himself and had the comfort in telling his parents, I want to be a writer, I want to be an English major, they may have just been like, cool, go be an English major. Or they might have said, what are you going to do with that? How are you going to make money? And what kind of career will you possibly get? But that is unfortunately a very big reality for a lot of young adults is they don't have confidence necessarily within themselves. So they're constantly being led or pushed in a direction that they don't want. And that's why having those moments with those students and others, what do you actually want? You see the change
Mhm.
for a lot of them.
You're
They're faced.
offering them that safe space to be able to
Yes,
to confront what do I want? Who do I want to be? What do I like about myself? What do I enjoy about life?
right. And I always preface it with, listen, I'm not here to tell you what to do. I think you're guaranteed are death and taxes. There's no other guarantees afforded to you. If you want to make a change, that's great, but you have to have a plan, but be flexible. One other example, I was working with a student and she had her entire life, the next 10 years. Like when you ask students, like, where do you see yourself in 5 or 10 years? She was like, okay, by 22, I will graduate college. By 25, I'll be engaged. By 27, I'll be married. By 30, I'll have my first kid. By 33. And I was like, whoa,
This archetype is known as the overplanner.
Why, it's me.
I sat down with her and I was like, listen, I'm not here to poke holes in your plan. I think it's admirable that you're thinking that far ahead in life. And I just was like, but what happens if, or in my experiences, like I knew I wanted to get married and have kids at some point, but I didn't get married until I was 31. I didn't have my first kid until I was like 35 or something. There's no playing by that rule set, as far as I'm concerned, only further creates or reinforces anxiety, especially when it's not your own drive. If she really had the drive to be in her established profession by 25, it'd be like, all right, you have a plan. There's a direction. You want to go in that direction. But being married and having all of that stuff is just, why tax and burden yourself with that? Especially, God forbid, you can't have kids. God forbid, you don't find the person. Like I hate to see someone set themselves up for that kind of pain.
I see it
You know?
as a roadmap to burnout. I've known so many people who have done just this. And sometimes they do reach that point of success and then they're tired, exhausted, burnt out, sick, or just miserable.
I have a slightly different perspective on this, and it will lead me into a question. So, what if that is a coping strategy or a coping mechanism for in high school, you have very limited choice. You're still a minor. Your parents are still telling you what to do. You can take either band or art or a language. Maybe some schools have robotics or shop, but it's very limited choice. It's legally mandated that you have to be in school. To all of a sudden, I don't know what I want to do with my life. I have to go decide. Society is pressuring me into college and you need a degree in order to pursue certain careers, etc. What if that plan was her trying to create some kind of structure in her life that she could follow, some kind of roadmap, some kind of whatever, so she didn't feel like she was spinning out in the chaos of trying to make all these adult decisions for the first time in her life, not really understanding where she's going, and trying to recreate that structure of, I know when I was like 10, I knew where my life was going to be for the next 10 years because I was going to be in school for all of it.
So, what you're saying is that she could potentially be setting up systems and setting expectations for herself.
That's my question of how do you create that structure and routine that sets you up for success?
Sure. Yeah, no, I get your point entirely. I think from the experience that I had with that one particular student, it was a matter of, if you keep it somewhat loose, like if the intended purpose is to go, let's just say she was going to work in an old folks home or something, like she wanted to do that kind of line of work. I could see her mapping out, she wants to finish her degree on time by the time she's 22, working in this type of field, maybe interning, whatever. I totally get that part of it. I think where it was losing me a little bit was, this is the only thing that's going to make me feel maybe safe. I guess the idea here was like, life will always throw you a curveball.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's why I like the idea of have a plan, 100% have a plan. If you want to affix timelines to it and really break it up, that's fantastic. But just also accept on some level, life will throw you curveballs. And then if it doesn't adhere specifically to what you think, then the potential for burnout, the potential for kind of disaster, as it were. Like my wife and I had this plan from the summer of how the fall was going to go. And then my mother-in-law passed away. So we had a plan and then this unexpected thing happened. But that is where I guess my wife and I are slightly different, because I'm looking at it like, okay, this is tragic. This is horrible. This is permanent. And my wife is in a lot of pain. And by extension of that, I'm suffering from this as well. But now my role has shifted. So I'm at home with my kids more. I'm supporting my wife and her siblings more. And I have my moments where I'm like, but what about me? What about my ideas? And then I go, okay, my time will come at some point. There's a bigger purpose in this case beyond me. I know where my energy can be placed beyond myself, let's say. When, let's say, a year's time, things will change in that regard. But also, I am, I guess, the type of ADHD where I Like I saw online, someone's like, were you the type of ADHD that over managed and over planned everything? Or did you just learn how to do it on the fly? And I very much am. I have to do a presentation. Let's show up 5 minutes beforehand and just make it work. And sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. But that's what makes sense to me. Like I can rely on my speaking abilities or my intelligence to carry me through most things. I sometimes fall flat in my face.
Exactly.
I
I-
can
Yeah.
totally empathize with the loss of an in-law. My father-in-law passed away at the end of June. We actually have an episode that we recorded on ADHD and grief that was accepted in the ADHD VCon or video convention that's going to be held at the end of October by the Montessori's group. If you would like to see that and get more information about ADHD and grieving, please stay tuned. But I understand what you were talking about when it comes to like having to step back, shift the responsibilities and shift your focus. We're getting a little off track with our conversation, but I just wanted to let you know that you're not alone.
Yes. And I saw that you guys posted on Instagram. That's amazing. Congratulations. That's so cool. When I was a kid, I was told to be flexible because I was very rigid about things. But I have found the value in being flexible and open to new ideas, new ways of doing things. And I recognize within myself that I can be incredibly stubborn. But I've also had those moments from, are you more focused on being right? Or are you more focused on learning? If I just presume that I'm correct about everything, which my wife will often tell me I'm not, it doesn't make me happy. That doesn't generate happiness for me, being right all the time. But connecting with somebody or sharing information or, God forbid, learning something makes me happy. It takes a minute, but it's like riding a bike for the first time. You fall and it sucks. And then you're like, oh, wait, other people can do it.
Yeah.
Why can't I? And then you figure it out and you're like, look at me. A whole new aspect of life has opened up for me where I can do more just because I stayed open to this process.
And how absolutely freeing is that realization?
Absolutely.
For the record, I want to say that I agree with you guys. I'm just a little bit closer to it, given that I'm still doing my master's degree currently. And I can see where that student was coming from in terms of societal expectations. What does success look like? How would you then reaffirm to that student that as they're going through this transition, as they are trying to embrace learning, which now I understand that's what the true goal is, learning and growth and being flexible and adapting to whatever comes your way. When you're 18, 19, how do you choose your own version of success? How do you set your own goals? What does that look like?
Often my approach to college students is trying to afford them space and opportunity to just to talk about what their interests are, to even give them ideas like planting seed of maybe take some time and really start thinking about what might make you happy. I totally get your point, Brianna, about an 18, 19-year-old. But I guess in my head, I'm scaling the age back, let's say, to 10 and really starting those conversations about what do you think you might want to be? Like my wife and I talked to my kids, my oldest, about what do you want to be? And one day she's, I want to be a fire truck. And we're like, fire truck? And then other days she's, I want to do this. I want to work with animals. And I'm like, amazing. Our only expectation for her is that she tries her best. She applies herself to it. And as long as it makes her happy and she's doing some kind of good for herself and for others, there's no right or wrong as far as we're concerned. We both, my wife and I both recognize the importance of having those conversations now. When those conversations are happening openly, honestly, and transparently, hopefully at a younger age, but with the understanding that my daughter at some point will be 10, she'll be 15, she'll be 20. If she says to me, Dad, I'm 30, and I thought I wanted to go in this direction, but I realized I don't, my first reaction is, great, it's scary, but good on you for having the wherewithal and the awareness to go, this doesn't make me happy. And sure, I can make money and pay bills and et cetera, but this isn't fulfilling to me anymore. And I need a new challenge. And I did that. I wanted to go in a different direction. And my wife was like, you can either be stuck, miserable, tired out, burnt, sick, or you can take a leap of faith and bet on yourself a little bit more and try it for a year. Just try it. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to try it. And it has benefited me across the board. You got to pay your mortgage. You got to pay your bills. Like you can't just up and quit. But that doesn't mean you can't go back to school. That doesn't mean you can't start drumming up an idea for a plan. That doesn't mean you can't take some of that precious free time that you have to research or shadow or observe somebody and see what life is like for them, to see, is the grass really greener on the other side? Because What I learned in undergraduate with education, when we would do observations, we'd have to write down notes of what we saw and the age groups and the activities and what we would do differently, et cetera. And every paper we had to write was like reflection oriented. What would I have done differently, and effectiveness and all that stuff. But it started in my head this cycle of reflective thinking about myself. And the difference was when I started going to therapy more seriously, relearning how to reflect positively the bad part, like on the defective part of the equation. And now, like I said before, my 30s, especially the later part of my 30s, is arguably my best years because I'm unlearning and reconfiguring what actually makes me happy or how I can actually appreciate myself as opposed to, you want me to be a square peg? I'll cut my corners and make myself a square peg to fit in the expectations that you place on me.
Yeah. Brianna, something that's haunting me about one of the points you were making is that this student that made this list, this very hardcore list of what she expected out of her life, that maybe she was trying to set up expectations for herself. The systems that we have in our youth that help us be successful, when we go to college, those disappear.
Yeah.
So how can a student set themselves up for success, making sure they have the things in place to have a support system when they're away at college?
Coming through from high school into college, either traditional college age or perhaps like a few years older, but usually in their late teens, early 20s. I have seen a lot of students in general, but neurodivergent students wing it. It's almost like you spin the globe and wherever you stick your finger, that's where you go. And they, again, I think it comes back to what are their intentions and what are their goals and what do they hope to get out of all this? And I have worked with some students or have been on the receiving end in higher education of students that were just like, I would say ambivalent to college because they didn't have a clear direction. But when it came to supports, unfortunately, it depends on your perspective, but a lot of parents do a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to support. My son or daughter has a learning disability. They have ADHD, autism, comorbidities, et cetera. I'm going to ensure that they get the accommodations that they need. I'm going to ensure that I put them in contact with the therapist or the counselor on campus and all that stuff. And when you lead the student to the direction or to the place, it takes the power out of it. It takes the sense of responsibility behind, why is the counselor so important to me if I have any mental health concerns or potential ones, or even just I'm a person, this is a new place, this is a transition, and I'm stressed, and I just want to talk to somebody a couple of times just to share my ideas. The same thing with academic support programs. The same thing with getting accommodations, both academic and non-academic. You can talk about disability rights all you want, but the person that it affects, if they're not listening to it, or if they don't feel its importance to them, then it's just words. It's not even words at that point, it's just sound. Like Charlie Brown's teacher, it's just sound at that point. But the question often becomes, what do schools and parents and institutions do to correct this or fix this? And that's, like I said, part of it comes with understanding and having an openness to other people and having ADHD or dyslexia or whatever. Part of it is parents and institutions going, you know what, perhaps I don't know everything about this and I need to do some more digging. I think, Melissa, you had mentioned in a podcast about you have a family member who was or is a principal.
Yeah.
Am I remembering that correctly?
Correct.
And their realization at one point, perhaps they didn't have all the answers, right?
Yeah. Through his own education, came to realize that these kids aren't broken. We're just not teaching them the way they need to be taught.
And I think there's such power in that, on that level too, of the food chain administratively. And that hopefully will have that downstream effect of, we can change the direction a little bit of the ship in that regard and change the culture. And this is all kind of pie in the sky idealistic, I understand, but got to start somewhere. And you think about empowerment partly comes because of self-knowledge, comes because of self-advocacy and having that power behind your voice to speak up. But it also comes from you even knowing what problem you're actually running into and then finding those supports like we talked about with counseling and disability accessibility offices or academic supports programs and et cetera.
How can a student with ADHD or a student who is neurodivergent create a plan to thrive in post-secondary education?
This is going to sound like a broken record, and I'm very sorry. Strategies, technology, everything that can be used to help lift somebody up or to help them establish routine and structure, all of that stuff, whether it's based in neurotypical thinking or more affirming thinking approaches. But to me, if I don't see the utility, the purpose, the connective tissue to what I'm doing and how that helps me in some way, like if there's no real world connection to why timers are so good or reminder systems and planners and pick the thing, if I don't see its utility and if it's not almost like immediately reinforcing to me, it falls by the wayside. Like I have my journal with me and the last entry in this was from May, I think. But at the time I was like, this is it. I'm going to get back into journaling. It's going to be awesome. But I lacked the structure and the purpose behind it. So for a lot of young folks, start with the strengths, start with the wants, start with what is it that you're actually looking for from your life, either in terms of specifics or at least what are the relatable qualities to what you intend to do. And then as much realistic connective tissue as you can get, like doing the shadowing, the observing, the interviewing of people in related fields that you might be considering. But also ask yourself intrinsically, is college the right step for me right now? Or is it better for me, let's say, in a couple of years? Or if you're thinking of doing the HVAC line of work or something blue collar, are you okay with that idea? And then what are the necessary next steps? I can motivate myself to do something when I see its purpose and how it can benefit myself or somebody else. It's all about trusting the process and most importantly, trusting yourself in that process and not letting someone else get in your ear and be like, what are you going to do? How are you going to make money? Are you sure you're even going to go to school at this point? And it's okay, parental figure, authority figure, whoever. Perhaps I'm going to use the time to do the research to get real place experience. And perhaps at the age of 20, I'll go, you know what? I have a much stronger idea than I did when I was 17. And I'm not going to just sign that big loan contract for tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars based on a maybe. Did you sign up for more or less like a house mortgage on a maybe?
And of course, he's signing up for these loans with ADHD brain that hasn't fully formed yet, that doesn't understand the consequences of money.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think developmentally speaking, we really have placed teenagers in this weird spot where they have to grow up quick sometimes. They have to start really maintaining their roles or figuring out what their roles actually are to help themselves, their family, etc. I'm playing with the idea of independence and interdependence and how I remember as a 17, 18, 19-year-old, like college student, I'm like, I'm going to be independent. I'm going to be my own adult and all that stuff until you have to pay bills, until you have to like get your credit check for a car or to rent an apartment. Then all of a sudden you're like, mommy, daddy, I need help. But if I approach it from the idea that I am an individual in a unique mosaic or system of others who can support me, and it doesn't have to be all the time, and I don't have to feel bad about getting support, and I'm not a burden for seeking it, I learn more about the importance of what support means to me, and by extension of that, how I can then help others too. It's not a bad thing to look out for yourself. Brianna, as you mentioned before, you basically can't pour from an empty cup. So the better you take care of yourself, the better you understand yourself, the better you can help someone else through that process too.
So to summarize and to throw in a little bit of ADHD things into some of what you've said, I think your main takeaway point here that if you know the why behind what you're doing, you're more likely to be successful. That's why we start all of our episodes with why are we even talking about this? Why does this topic matter? Then that success is just that maybe you were talking about in that student debt, acknowledging the privilege that it takes to be able to change your mind and to able to have that safety net behind you. You also mentioned beautifully in the show that if that is your reality, there are alternative ways to figure out what you want from your life. And if that is taking a gap year, or if that is shadowing someone, or if that is making money before going to college, just follow the steps that have been laid out because you're looking for some kind of structure, because you're looking for some kind of external validation or success or parental pressure or authority figure pressure. Figure out why it's important to you. Find something that sparks joy for you and use the strategies that work for you.
Yes, that's exactly correct.
So if you don't know where to start when it comes to this whole education thing, there are people out there who can assist you. Dustin is one of those people. Dustin, can you tell us where they can find your information and what they can do if they need help?
Absolutely. My website is P as in Peter, C as in Charlie, H as in Horvath, pch-consulting.com. I offer a free consultation and you can talk with me. My podcast is ADHD in a Hurry.
Thank you so much for taking your time to join us today.
Really?
Brianna, anything else you want to say?
Just that this is super important because we deserve to succeed in the same way that a neurotypical person does. So if we need extra strengths or internal motivation to get there, then whatever that takes to do that and to get that education, even if it's not formal, lifelong learning is super important. So yeah, thank you so much, Dustin, for being here and talking with us about this. We really appreciate it.
And if you need further support or ADHD coaching, Brianna and I are both ADHD coaches. I can be found at likemindcoaching.com. And Brianna?
Yes, I am an ADHD coach and therapy intern, and you can find me at understandingadhd.ca.
Thank you so much. All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Hypercast.
If you've enjoyed today's episode and want to stay connected, be sure to rate and subscribe. And check out the show notes for links to our social media and websites.
Whether you're seeking practical tips, heartfelt stories, or just a sense of community, Hypercast is here for you.
Remember, you're not alone in your ADHD journey. Together, we can navigate the highs and lows with courage and compassion.
So until next time, take care, stay curious, and keep embracing your unique neurodiversity.
Catch you on the next episode of Hypercast.